You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the next episode of Star Trek Prodigy's second season, Cracked Mirror. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on X, where we're at SQPN, and leave us comments wherever you'll find us on social media. We love to hear from you. And another show on the StarQuest Network I'm sure that you'll enjoy is The Secrets of Star Wars, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/Star Wars. So we are talking about Cracked Mirror, which is, the 14th episode of this season?
Yep.
And so we're heading toward the end very soon. But let's talk about this one. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in Cracked Mirror?
This week, Chakotay and the kids finish their proto-warp trip back to Voyager, but when they get there, they have a big surprise waiting for them. Like Wesley told them a few episodes ago, the protostar paradox has created a crack in reality, and their proto-warp voyage has now punched a hole through that crack. They end up on a Voyager where every deck is a different alternate reality. They start on one where Admiral Jellicoe is in charge because Janeway is dead. Zero and Rock then go to a reality where Tuvix, not Tuvok, is captain, and Chakotay and the rest go to one where the protostar weapon took down every vessel in Starfleet. In that reality, Voyager is adrift, and the outrageous Akona is outrageously stripping it for parts. Chakotay and the kids figure out what's going on, and they develop a plan to go to the bridge and use the deflector dish to seal the crack, which should snap them back to their own reality. But when Akona tries to transport them to the bridge, they end up in the transporter room in the Mirror Universe, where evil Janeway and evil Chakotay are in charge of apparently a bunch of robots. Evil Janeway leaves evil Chakotay to interrogate them, but once they're alone, Murph KOs evil Chakotay, and good Chakotay begins impersonating him. They make their way to the bridge and reprogram the deflector dish, but before it can finish recalibrating, the Loom attack. Evil Janeway uses Voyager's phasers to deal with most of them, but one gets through, and since Chakotay doesn't have one of the time stabilizers that Wesley gave the kids, he starts to go into time slowdown before he can activate the deflector dish. Fortunately, Gwen leaps in, avoids the Loom, and manages to activate the dish, snapping them all back to their own reality, where Captain Chakotay finally, at long last, has a heartfelt reunion with Admiral Janeway. The end.
Father, what'd you think of this one?
I thought it was a good episode. I was excited to see the Mirror Universe again, and I thought this episode did not disappoint. And I've always liked the Mirror Universe and alternate realities in general. I thought there was a little possible continuity error following from the Deep Space Nine Mirror episodes, but I can headcanon around it a couple different ways that we can maybe get to later.
Okay. How about you, Jimmy?
I thought it was a fun episode. I was a little undersold on the Mirror Universe in this one. I'm a fan of certain Mirror Universe episodes, but not others. I like what they did with the Mirror Universe in the original Trek and in some of the other series, but I didn't really like a lot of what they did with Voyager. With Deep Space Nine, where you had Kira, the evil Kira Nerys intendant, slinking around, and where you had the Terran Alliance had fallen apart as a result of the actions of Mr. Spock, and especially where they had Vic Fontaine as a holodeck character in the Mirror Universe.
I'd forgotten about that.
Even Rom said, well, I know it's the alternate universe, but it shouldn't be that alternate. So they even called that out on screen. This was kind of in the middle for me. I guess what I would like to see is I would like to see it explored more. Mm-hmm. And I would like to see alternate versions of our kids. Because that's part of the fun of a Mirror Universe episode is you get to see alternate versions of our primary heroes, and we didn't get to see that here. So it also, they seem to, like I mentioned in the recap, the only mirror characters we saw were Janeway and Chakotay, and everyone else is either a robot or they're wearing some kind of face mask. And, I guess that's a cost-cutting measure, because they save on animation if they don't have to make more models of people. And also they don't have to pay more actors. If they what would have been fun is getting to see the entire Mirror Voyager crew. Mm-hmm. But they only gave us
and Noom and
and the Doctor and and Harry Kim and Tom Paris and all that stuff. But we only got Janeway and Chakotay, and so I was a little disappointed in terms of how much we explored the Mirror Universe. What was there was fine, but I just was hoping for more.
Yeah, and I thought it was fine. Good adventure. I echo a lot of the same sort of things you guys said. I would also add that it would have been fun to explore a few more realities. Even we didn't really get to see at all the reality that.
The Tuvix one would have been. I would love to see that. Mm-hmm. It's like, hi, I'm Captain Tuvix. Janeway didn't murder me in this reality.
right. That would be it would be interesting to see a little bit more of the other ones. But it's a 25-minute episode, and you got to do what you got to do.
Really, 21 when you cut out all the junk.
Yeah, right. The opening, they really don't need the long opening credits on every episode. It's kind of funny. So, it was good. I mean, what was there was okay, and I find the Mirror Universe stuff interesting. Just to add a little fun Mirror Universe tidbit in while we're talking about, I remember I mentioned I went to the Star Trek's original series set tour up in Ticonderoga, New York over the summer. So I see their stuff on social media, and they're having a Halloween party where it's going to be a Mirror Universe Halloween party. So everyone can come dressed as their Mirror Universe counterpart to the set, and they will have the whole setup done up as the Mirror Universe thing. On the set, they actually have the little device, the Tantalus device, or what was that what it's called?
The Tantalus device.
They have that on set behind the panel that they can open up and activate and stuff.
So are you supposed to come as a Mirror Universe Star Trek character or as a Mirror Universe version of the real world you?
I think either. You have the option. So you could come as like a Terran Empire, Enterprise crew member, or one of the slave races, I guess. Or you could maybe come as yourself too, as an alternate version of yourself, which would be, gosh, that would be real fun. I think.
Anyone who has sleeveless shirts they've been looking to use for something would be able to jump in well on that.
Jimmy, you could tear the sleeves off a couple of your purple shirts and go as an alternate you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't do the option of going with a goatee.
Yeah, right. I have to say things about that beard, by the way, but we'll get to that when we get into it. But one of the things I thought was interesting was Gwyn's stabilizer, that she's been wearing. It kept shifting, like numbers kept changing on it. Was that a reflection of was she affecting the realities, or was it reflecting that she was shifting in realities? You get a sense of that?
It's the realities were affecting her, the way they set it up, because that's why they try to do the transporter rather than go up through the decks, because each time she goes through a new reality, the stabilizer was meant to keep her stable in one reality. It's being progressively damaged by trying to stabilize her in multiple others. And they thought, we're going to have to go up 8 decks. That's going to wreak havoc with her stabilizer. And so that's why they tried to do the transport.
Okay. That makes sense then. So, something else that occurred to me is, of all the characters from Star Trek, the guest characters that I would expect to show up several times, the outrageous Okona would never be in even my top 20.
Agreed.
No.
He has shown up multiple times in both Prodigy and also he showed up in Lower Decks. It's kind of funny. Like, what do you think? Is it the availability of the actor, or is it the character?
I think it's the writers have just developed on both Lower Decks and on Prodigy, are amused by the character, and so they're deliberately bringing him back as a fan service because his episode is so hated from Next Gen.
Yeah,
it was really terrible. He was like a Han Solo wannabe that completely failed. And in fact, there's a website. I'm not sure if it's still active, but it's called the Agony Booth. And what it does is it gives reviews of awfully bad programs. And so, and it's, based on the Agony Booth from the Mirror Universe episode of the original series. And so it's like your torture is to read the review, and the reviews are hilarious, but you read the reviews of these awful episodes, and they've got one on the outrageous Icona, and they talk about all the different ways it's horrible, including the fact that the outrageous Icona has what they call informed attributes, where instead of showing you, they have to tell you. So it's not, we're not going to show you that Icona is outrageous. We're just going to tell you that he's outrageous. And usually that when you have informed attributes where people, instead of showing us, are being told about someone, it's a sign of bad writing.
Yeah.
And so, but I remember the takedown of the outrageous Icona, and it was savage. So I think that the writers on both shows are just amused by the character and like bringing him back because it's so unexpected, and it's fan service.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes on this, I said this was kind of a random scene to have him in there, and the only thing I can see where it really advances the plot is he kind of describes what's going on in that particular universe, and that's really it. I mean, his description is the only thing that really moves anything along in that.
Yeah, he doesn't go with them on the, that would have been interesting to see him but he's just kind of there, does a cameo, and he's gone.
Well, he's getting his parts. That's all he's there for. Basically, functionally what this sequence does is it allows our characters to get enough of an exposition dump that they can figure out what's going on and then figure out a plan.
Right.
And so that's all he's there for, is to give them an exposition dump.
Yeah.
And I understand why he wouldn't want to leave. If someone said, "Oh, hey, we just dropped into your universe. You want to come with us?" It's like, no, I think I'll stay here.
Right. Well, it wouldn't have been too great to go from there to the Mirror Universe. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, before we talk about the Mirror Universe itself, where most of the action takes place, the interesting when Rock and Zero end up in the ship commanded by Tuvix is there's also the people from the Enterprise from season 1's All the World's a Stage.
They were the Thermian equivalents on this world in Star Trek Prodigy. They were the alien race that started imitating Starfleet.
And they were the crew on Tuvix's ship, right?
Yeah, which was weird. It's like, okay, how did that happen?
Yeah, I want to know how that all came about. There was also, I guess, an Easter egg so this was according to Memory Alpha, and a glass case next to the turbolift that Rock and Zero visit in that version of Voyager. There's a symbiogenetic alien orchid in a glass case that we previously saw in the Voyager episode named Tuvix, and on the Lower Decks episode 2 TWO Vix. So episodes involving Tuvok and Neelix combining. So I just thought that was a funny little Easter egg that they threw in there to make the connection. That was fun.
Yeah.
Rather than having Okana be the one to give the exposition dump, imagine how neat it would have been to have Tuvix doing that.
Yeah,
I know.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, that would have been fun. So let's talk about the Mirror Universe one that they end up in. Interesting that Janeway, did you notice she had Seven's Borg implant?
Yeah, I did.
Above her eye. I thought that was interesting little thing.
At first, I thought we were in a Borgified universe, and so that was a little bit of a. I don't know. I'd probably classify that as a little bit of a misstep for me because it didn't scream Mirror Universe at me. It's because we've already seen other universes, and So I'm just thinking at first, oh, this is in a universe where Janeway has Seven's implants. And I don't know why that would be uniquely true of the Mirror universe. They didn't provide any explanation for that.
I like the idea though that an interesting possible story behind it that they didn't have to get into and explain, but just ideas.
Did she steal Seven's implants, or is this left over from when the Mirror Borg assimilated her, or what's going on?
Yeah, what is the Mirror Universe Borg like, and what their interaction with the Terran Empire and all that sort of stuff? How would that have happened? It's kind of an interesting idea or interesting question on how that would have worked. And for me, I like that they put things in that they don't expo dump on you. This is why this is there. It's just there, and it makes you think about it and that sort of thing. I mean, you're right. It doesn't scream Mirror Universe to me. It could be a little confusing, perhaps, but I think they clear it up pretty quickly. That no, this is the Mirror Universe. But I thought it was an interesting little detail that they threw in. Now, of course, in the Mirror Universe, if someone doesn't have a beard in the Prime Universe, then they will have one in the Mirror Universe showing that they're evil, like Chakotay. Although, since when does a bunch of grease on your face look like a beard?
Yeah. This is not how beards work.
That's not... This is not how beards work. Yeah.
And it doesn't even look like the beard that they put on evil Chakotay. I mean, his beard looked like it was made out of, animated hair, but it didn't look like it was just smeared on.
I know. I'm not sure that would fool anyone for even a minute.
And in fairness, it didn't fool evil Janeway.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I also note that evil Chakotay, or Mirror Chakotay, makes the classic mistake of underestimating Murph. He just thinks he's, blob guy, but Murph's got moves. He's got the ability to take care of business. So, and he's how they escape. So that works out really well.
And once they start their escape, what the heck does Murph go about putting a fake goatee on himself for, right? I mean, there's not a Mirror Murph that he's trying to impersonate or anything that we had seen.
Yeah. No, they call attention to that, though, where I think it's Gwen looks down at him after he makes the after he makes the goatee on himself and says, "I don't think that's strictly necessary, but I appreciate the enthusiasm."
Yeah, Murph is kind of like just a wild child. He's sort of like it's a little out of control sometimes, a little just off, and when he's on their side, so that works for them. I did appreciate the fact that they end up running into the cetacean lab on Voyager,
with
even the whales are
evil whale with eye, with a scar through its eye.
Yeah. So, in the Mirror Universe, either you have a scar or a beard. I mean, I think that's really how we determine, that you're the Mirror one. But yes, even the whales are evil. Jankum yells, which is great.
And what the whale does is it immediately starts calling attention to them to alert security where they are.
Right.
And I thought Jankum was going to flood the that hallway that they were in, that's because they were caught in there, which would be a callback to, in one sense, to the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, because he did a similar thing on that when they were in an underwater fortress. But no, instead it was just they throw it up the barriers and that sort of stuff. But they do. The appearance of the loom was surprising. Actually, before we get to that, they did say that every deck was a different reality, and we're trying to claim that the bridge, everything, the cetacean lab, the place that they're holding them, and the bridge itself, and the transporter room were all on the same deck. Kind of stretched the believability for me a little bit there.
Didn't they say something though about after they got to the sort of the bridge in the Mirror Universe, something about it being stabilized there or something now? I may not be remembering correctly. I must, or I could have not remember that, but I guess the whole point was all of this reality hopping was to be in the Mirror Universe, and that's where they were going to stay once they got there. The reality hopping is a reminder too there's a Voyager episode from the 7th season called Shattered, where every deck was a different time period. Not a different reality, but a different time period from Voyager.
Chakotay mentions that in this. He says, I've dealt with something like this before.
Right, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they've had to deal with time and, alternate realities on Voyager a number of times, in fact. So it was surprising to see the loom again. That was effective because we've been told Wesley had taken care of them, but of course, as they call out in the dialogue, that this
in our universe, he's dealt
in
with
our
them.
universe, right? But because they're now jumped reality, they're finding them in this universe. And it's suitably high stakes. There is a moment on the bridge where Chakotay has the drop on Mirror Janeway, and then says, "I can't harm you in any reality." Like this is just a.
Oh yeah, what a naive you are. There are realities where she has torn out your heart and eaten it while you're still alive. You can harm her in some realities.
Right. But apparently that is enough to try to soften her heart toward him or whatever.
A little, maybe.
A little. I mean, in the end, she's the one who, helps, them get back to their own reality, through her actions.
Well, she zaps the loom to keep him from destroying her ship.
Yeah.
But that's self-interest.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but it seemed like the way that they animated her, her sort of softened her toward them. But
I think we're meant to take something like that away from it. And then she says, this doesn't mean we're allies or something to that effect.
Yeah,
but I think the subtext is we're allies a little bit now.
Mm-hmm.
They do mention at some point, the Mirror, Chakotay, and Janeway, that they're aware of the Prime universe and that there had been steps taken to prevent this sort of thing from happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that the incursions were happening enough.
Yeah, I'd want to know, what the heck did you do to your universe to make it less open to penetration from another universe? I mean, that's some fancy tech.
Yeah, well, I can imagine the Starfleet and the Prime universe wanting to do the same thing, after Smiley abducts Cisco that time.
Yeah, the only thing I can think is maybe it's something to do, because normally when we get a crossover, it has to do with transporter malfunction.
Right.
And so maybe they've built some circuit into transporters to make them less likely to have this kind of crossover.
Yeah.
That was what I was thinking as well, that it had to be something with the transporter system that they're thinking about.
Right. Those transporters
because they're not the Q. They can't just change the gravitational constant of the universe.
I mean, simple.
Yeah.
So in the end, our heroes are, returned to the Prime Voyager, and we get, like, as you mentioned, the Janeway Chakotay reunion, which for Chakotay, it's been a long time. I mean, he's been stranded for 10 years. So whatever that, plus however long it's been in the prime timeline. So, it was a nice moment. It's nice to see, a little emotional reunion there. Voyager fans, and excited.
And Admiral Janeway hadn't seen Captain Chakotay since the Protostar launched years and years ago.
Right? Was it years and years? I mean, I don't remember.
Yeah, because it ended up. I mean, the timeline. I don't know that they've clarified it. Yeah, I don't know that they fully clarified it for us, but it's clear that she's been wanting to find him for a very long time.
Okay.
And he's finally found.
Okay. Because I knew for him, he'd been stranded for 10 years on top of all that. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they still need to get the Protostar back. I mean, that's sort of still hanging over them. They need to get that Protostar back buried in that rock, in the planet where the kids find it. So.
And we got 6 episodes to go, so we can expect more motion on the on the Essentia Diviner front.
Right.
That's true. That's good. That's all going to be resolved still as well. Trying to think of any other things that we haven't talked about. Any thoughts?
Yeah, one thought is, the last time we saw, not last time in terms of us viewing, but last time in terms of the sort of chronology within Star Trek, the last time we saw the Mirror Universe was toward the end of Deep Space Nine, where the Terrans had been slaves to the Klingons and Cardassians, and they were sort of in the midst of an uprising and at least reclaiming their independence. If you had not seen any of Deep Space Nine and you watched this episode, you might just assume that from the time of Kirk and Spock all the way until this episode that the Terran Empire had been just a constant thing, because there's no explanation about the Empire being restored. There's nothing, in reference to, any of those DS9 episodes. So, Memory Alpha's explanation is that in the 9 years that have passed between our last seeing them on DS9 and then seeing them now, that the Terran Empire has been restored within that time frame. But my first thought in watching the episode was, maybe this is not the mirror universe that we saw on Deep Space Nine. Maybe it's a mirror universe. So just like, when our heroes first beam in and there's Admiral Jellicoe on the ship, that's very close to the Prime timeline, but just a little bit different. What if this is very close to the mirror universe, but just a little bit different?
Well, I would be, if we're going to play that game, I'd be happy to eject the Mirror Universe from Deep Space Nine, as that's the one that's not the real Mirror Universe.
And that's another possibility, certainly, yeah.
Interesting. Because we've had the Mirror Universe in Enterprise and then Discovery and Prodigy.
One of the best was in Enterprise,
right?
Where we saw an early stage of the Mirror Universe.
Yeah,
right. And
it was completely Mirror Universe. There was really no interaction with our Prime timeline,
right? Yeah, except for the ship coming over.
The ship that came across.
Yeah. So interesting to. It's an interesting point. There is a bit, like I think you mentioned earlier, that's the discontinuity that you're talking about.
Right.
Another thing that interesting that they could have done, they didn't do, was bring in characters from Picard, because this is, taking place in that time period, that sort of around the same time as Picard.
It's earlier than Picard.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not like during those seasons, but those characters, like, Rafi and those characters were active in this time period. Picard is off doing the Romulan thing. I don't know, just thought it could have been interesting. I don't know that it's necessary. It probably isn't, but it's something they could have done. Kind of interesting to cross over more shows.
Why do you want to ruin this TV show?
Well, I mean, honestly, I would love to see like a cross a Mirror Universe Shaw, Captain Shaw, like that. I'd like to see him.
That
again.
Would be fun.
That would be fun. But again, 21-minute show, can't do everything.
Could have also had.
If you want to see a Mirror Universe Captain Shaw, watch 12 Monkeys, because that actor is playing a similar character in 12 Monkeys. He can be your mirror Captain Shaw.
Yeah.
It's on my list. It's definitely on my list of things to watch.
We could have even seen Mirror Universe versions of Lower Decks characters.
Yeah. We've done a Lower Decks mirror episode, haven't we?
Okay.
Have they? I'm not sure. Have we?
I think we have, but I haven't. I enjoy Lower Decks, but I haven't rewatched it as much as some other shows yet.
Yeah. I just I don't remember now, but yeah, that would be funny to see some of those. Anything else we've missed we want to talk about?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the episode, Majel, I think, is a little nervous about the proto-warp they're experiencing, and Zero explains it by saying, "Don't worry, proto-warp is merely bending space-time around us," as an explanation for how they're going so fast. And it's like, dude, that is how all warp drive works.
Right.
That is the principle behind the Alcubierre warp drive in real life. There's no such thing as warp drive if it's not bending space around you.
Right. Hence the name warp. You're warping in space. So.
Right.
Yeah.
My thought too with this is, how much faster is proto warp than say warp 9.9? I mean, we know warp 10 is what you can't do unless you want to turn into salamanders and do whatever. But 9.9 was a sort of common thing on Next Generation. It seems like the Enterprise D could sustain it for a few minutes or whatever. And that was supposed to be really fast. And again, you're getting close to, the top of the scale there. Is proto warp the equivalent of 9.9999 or something? Or
it's got to be something like that.
Yeah.
They've never clarified it. Yeah. And proto warp is a bad name for it, because that would mean first warp,
right?
Which you think would be lower. like warp 1.
Warp 1, speed of light or something, yeah.
But the whole warp scale, I think they screwed up in Next Gen. It made much more sense. I mean, when we have airplanes flying at hypersonic velocities, we have the Mach scale.
Right.
And the faster they go, the higher the Mach number. They don't approach Mach 20 asymptotically. You know, that would make no sense in terms of expressing how fast a ship is going. So I think they should just ultimately undo that and go back to the kind of scale they had in the original series, where you're going warp 6 or warp 8 or warp 10 or warp 12 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I would have appreciated if warp were an expression of the engine power as opposed to pure speed or velocity, because then you don't have to worry about distances and time, and it's an expression of the amount of power being generated to create the warp bubble, and that would be in that relates to, because like even with Mach speeds, the actual ground speed is different depending on altitude. So Mach 1 at sea level is different from, in actual velocity is different from Mach 1 at 100,000 feet. It's almost, it would be better to just get away from that, try to make a direct correlation. I think proto-warp is maybe supposed to be like quantum slipstream, which is also a faster than warp. We're doing a whole different way of flying around the laws of physics, so to speak, that's faster than the old warp way of doing things.
Yeah. Also wanted to mention, we do have a name for the Tribble that's now accompanying us for no apparent reason, but may become apparent. They may give it a reason later in the series. Its name is Bribble. That's not just what they're calling its species. That's what they're calling this particular entity.
Yep.
And I liked how when they left Hollow Janeway in charge of it, she turned her finger into a laser pointer and started using it as a cat toy to distract Bribble, which I thought was nice.
That was good. That was good.
I also liked a couple of lines. There's one line where Chakotay has just been explaining something. I think it's the plan for how we're going to get back. And Dal says, "I don't know what you're saying, but I like the way you're saying it." and then there's also a really good line that Evil Janeway gets where Kate Mulgrew gets to say, "I've always hated children." which I wonder, now part of that joke is she is herself a mother and has multiple children and has made life decisions based on her children, and taking care of them. I wonder though if some of that, if there's also a reference there to the children they had on Voyager, because they had those Borg children and they had, I'm blanking on her name, Naomi Wildman. And I wonder, I just can't help wondering if there's something buried in there about it was difficult working with those child actors. Yes.
And the Hollow children from when she was in the Hollow novel, the governess.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I get having children on Voyager, because if you're facing a 70-year journey, you need to move on with life to the extent you can. And having children's part of that. I would never have had children on the Enterprise, but I understand having children on Voyager. But wow, a lot of those episodes were really lame.
Jim, when you say Dax's line about, I don't know what you're saying, but I like how you say it, that's me a lot of times in Mysterious World. Just kidding. You explained very well.
Thank you. By the way, I also recently, back in the 1970s and 80s, there was a soap opera called Ryan's Hope. It was set in New York City, which was unusual for a soap opera. Normally they're set in fictional locations. And it was about an Irish immigrant family, the Ryan family, who ran a bar. And this show was head and shoulders better than other soap operas. It was less campy. It involved more complex psychological writing, and it won numerous Daytime Emmy Awards for how good it was compared to other soap operas. and I happened to watch it. It was the one soap opera I was really interested in because of how well written it was. And Kate Mulgrew was one of the pivotal characters on the show. Mm-hmm. She played a character named Mary Ryan, who was one of the daughters in the family. And she had gotten killed before I started watching it, but I would always be hearing about Mary Ryan and the impact she had on the other characters and stuff. And then occasionally they would bring her back because the show would occasionally incorporate supernatural elements. And so I would get to see Kate Mulgrew coming back as Mary Ryan. And recently, I found out a while back that they've basically got all the Ryan's Hope episodes on YouTube. And so recently, I went back and I watched the very first episode of Ryan's Hope, and it actually starts with Kate Mulgrew as Mary Ryan walking down the street, waving at people and talking and stuff. And she goes into the bar, and wow, she is so young. Mm-hmm. You know, because this is like 75 or something. But it's just really interesting to see her playing someone other than Janeway and being a young actress. And she also played Mrs. Columbo in that horror series. I'm sorry, she's not the real Mrs. Columbo. But not unless Mr. Columbo was robbing the cradle. But it was just fascinating to see her in this other role and noting the similarities and differences, but how it's still recognizably Kate Mulgrew.
There is, of course, a Ryan's Hope wiki. You can find pictures of her as Mary Ryan on there. You can see how young she looked. By the way, there was not a Lower Decks Mirror Universe episode per se where they actually traveled to the Mirror Universe, but there was an episode called Mirror Universe. Well, no, there was an episode where they went on the holodeck for a Mirror Universe encounter.
Well, then they need to do one in season 5.
Yes. So, Father, did you have any other final notes before we?
Just wanted to mention, and Jimmy said this earlier, I thought this ended a little quickly. I was hoping the story was going to stretch out a bit more. This easily could have been a good 2-parter, but overall, pretty decent episode.
Yeah. I feel like Prodigy has enough substance where you could do full episodes instead of the 20-something minute, as we see by the number of 2-parters that they've done in this season. It really deserves, like, the story is got enough there. It really kind of deserves to have a longer episodes. Wish it did. Maybe if we ever do get a 3rd season, it's not impossible. That would be something maybe they think about doing. So we'll see. All right, so that'll do it for us this time. Before we go, I do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And remember, your donations are tax deductible. We are a nonprofit organization. So that's it from us this time. We'd love to know what you thought of Cracked Mirror. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can send an email to trek@sqpn.com. Visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you should also hit the bell, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode of Prodigy called Ascension. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Tom, and live long and prosper.
And Father Jason Tyler, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, never trust the cute ones.